My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old, and until 9 months ago, I thought I had built a good life. Not a perfect life, I had stopped believing in perfect somewhere around my late 20s, but a good one, a solid one. The kind you look at on a quiet Sunday morning and think, yes, this is enough. This is real. I work as a physical therapist at a rehabilitation center in Austin. My job is to help people put themselves back together after something has broken them, a torn ligament, a car accident, a stroke that stole the use of someone's left hand. I am good at my job because I understand, on a cellular level, that healing is not a straight line. It is a series of small, painful steps forward, sometimes followed by a stumble back, and then forward again. I told my patients that every single day. I had no idea I was about to need that advice for myself. My husband and I had been married for 5 years. I had met him at a mutual friend's birthday party, back when I was still living in Nashville. He was funny, attentive, the kind of man who remembered the small things. He remembered that I took my coffee with oat milk and 1 sugar. He remembered that I hated the sound of chewing and always sat across from me at restaurants, never beside me. He remembered the name of the elementary school teacher I mentioned once in passing who had made me cry in front of the whole class in 3rd grade. I thought his memory was a form of love. I thought paying that much attention meant he cherished me. We moved to Austin 2 years after our wedding because he got a senior engineering position at a tech company. I found a job I loved within 3 months. We bought a house in the Mueller neighborhood, a small craftsman with a deep porch and an oak tree in the backyard so old that the roots had started lifting the sidewalk. I loved that tree. I used to drink my coffee on that porch every morning and look at it and feel, quietly, something close to gratitude. We had been trying for a baby for 14 months. I don't talk about those 14 months easily, even now. If you have been through it, you know the specific kind of grief attached to a negative test. It is not a loud grief. Nobody sends flowers. Nobody calls to check in. You put the test in the bathroom trash, you wash your face, and you go back to your life, and the life looks exactly the same as it did 15 minutes ago, but something inside you has quietly shifted, like furniture rearranged in a room you navigate by memory. My husband would hug me when I came out of the bathroom. He would say the right things. He would say, "We have time." He would say, "It'll happen." He would rub my back in small circles the way I liked, and whisper that he loved me, that he loved us, that everything was going to be fine. I believed him every single time. The morning everything changed, I was not in a doctor's office. I was not standing in a hospital corridor. I was sitting in the waiting room of a title company called Lone Star Closings on South Lamar, holding a paper cup of bad coffee, wearing my work scrubs because I had a patient at 2 o'clock and had come straight from my morning shift. We were refinancing the house. Rates had dropped, and my husband had handled everything, the paperwork, the calls with the mortgage broker, all of it. He was good at that, managing the logistics of our life. I had always let him. I thought it was partnership. I thought it was him carrying his share. He was supposed to meet me there at 10:30. At 10:45, he texted, "Running late. Go ahead and start without me. You have POA, it's fine. Love you." I didn't think anything of it. He was often running late. I just thought he was stuck in traffic. The woman at the closing table was maybe 26, with a blonde bun and a floral blazer that was slightly too big for her. She set a thick folder in front of me, flipped it to the first tab, and said, with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times, "We'll start with the property disclosure and work our way through." I nodded and picked up the pen, and that was when she hesitated. It was barely perceptible. A slight pause, the kind a person makes when they have just realized they've said something they shouldn't have, or seen something on a page they weren't expecting. Her eyes moved from the folder to my face and back again, and something shifted in her expression, not alarm exactly, but a careful, deliberate stillness. The kind of stillness that lives just before a very hard conversation. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "Just one moment," she said. She stood up and said she needed to get her manager to verify something. She smiled at me, a tight, apologetic smile, and left the room. I sat alone for almost 4 minutes. The office was quiet. A motivational print on the wall said, "Home is where your story begins." I stared at it without reading it. When she came back, there was an older woman with her, maybe 50, with silver-framed reading glasses and the unhurried manner of someone who had learned, over years, how to deliver bad news without flinching. "Mrs. Calloway," she said, sitting across from me. She folded her hands on the table. "I need to ask you a few questions before we proceed, and I want you to understand that I'm asking because we have a legal and ethical obligation to flag any discrepancies in our documentation." My coffee cup was sweating in my palm. "There is another refinancing application on file for this property," she said carefully. "Filed approximately 7 weeks ago, under a different address." She pushed a single sheet of paper across the table toward me. "Can you tell me if you're aware of this application and if you recognize this name as a co-borrower?" I looked at the paper. The property listed was our house. Our address. The oak tree and the deep porch and the 30-year mortgage we had signed together at a different table not 3 years ago. The co-borrower listed was a name I did not recognize. Amanda Reeves. Beneath her name was a phone number. Beneath that was an address in Cedar Park, a suburb about 20 miles north of Austin. And beneath that, in the box labeled Relationship to Primary Borrower, were 2 words that made the room tilt sideways. Domestic partner. I read it twice, then 3 times. The letters stayed exactly the same. "I wasn't aware of this," I heard myself say. My voice came out with a strange, floating quality, disconnected from my body in the way voices sometimes do when the mind has not yet caught up to what the eyes have seen. The woman with the silver glasses was still watching me carefully. "The application was ultimately flagged and not approved because of inconsistencies in the documentation. But the attempt is on file." She paused. "Mrs. Calloway, I'm going to give you a moment. Can I get you some water?" I don't remember saying yes. I don't remember her leaving and coming back. I remember looking at that name, Amanda Reeves, Cedar Park, and feeling something happen in my chest that was not quite pain and not quite shock. It was more like the sensation of stepping onto a staircase and finding, at the bottom, that there is one more step than you thought there was. I took a photograph of the document with my phone before the manager could change her mind about showing it to me. I did not call my husband on the drive home. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my rehabilitation center for 6 minutes before my 2 o'clock patient, and I breathed, and I looked at the photo on my phone, and I understood with a clarity that surprised me that I was not going to cry about this yet. Not yet. The crying could come later. Right now I needed to think. I am a physical therapist. My job is assessment before treatment. You do not begin rehabilitation until you understand the full scope of the injury. I needed to understand the full scope. I canceled my remaining afternoon patients with a migraine I did not have. I went home. I sat at the kitchen table where we ate dinner together every night, where we did the crossword on Sunday mornings, where I had sat across from my husband and watched his face and thought I knew it completely, and I typed Amanda Reeves, Cedar Park, Texas into my search bar. The first result was a LinkedIn profile. Elementary school teacher, 2nd grade, a school about 4 miles from the Cedar Park address. Her photo showed a woman around my age, maybe a year or 2 younger, brown hair cut to her chin, a warm, open smile. In the photo, she was standing in front of a classroom wall covered in construction paper stars, each one with a student's name on it. She looked kind. She looked like the kind of woman who remembered the names of all her students' pets. I kept scrolling. A Facebook profile, semi-private. A few public photos, a Christmas tree, a hiking trail, and then, dated 8 months ago, a photo that I had to look at twice before my brain would process what I was seeing. My husband. He was standing beside Amanda Reeves in front of what appeared to be a state park overlook somewhere outside the city. His arm was around her shoulders. She was leaning into him. They were both laughing at something outside the frame. He was wearing the gray Henley I had given him for his birthday last year. He looked happy in a way I had not seen in a long time. I closed my laptop. I stood up from the kitchen table. I walked into the bathroom. Because somehow the bathroom is always where you go when you need a moment that belongs only to you. And I looked at my own face in the mirror for a long time. Then I went back to the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea I did not drink, sat down again, and started making a plan. I want to be honest about the next 2 days, because I think honesty is the only thing that makes any of this worth telling. I did not collapse. I did not confront my husband that night when he came home, giving me a kiss on the cheek and telling me the closing had rescheduled and asking what I wanted for dinner, as if the word domestic partner had never appeared on a sheet of paper with his name at the top. I said pasta was fine. I sat across from him and watched him eat and listened to him talk about a work problem, and I felt the particular loneliness of understanding something about a person that they don't know you understand yet. It is a very cold feeling, very still, like standing in a room where all the sound has been removed. I spent those 2 days learning things. I learned that our joint savings account, the one we had been adding to every month for 3 years as a down payment on a larger house someday, had $1,200 left in it. It had held over $40,000 in January. I learned that my husband had taken out a personal loan 18 months ago using documentation that included my forged signature. I learned that the Cedar Park address associated with Amanda Reeves corresponded to a house that had been leased 14 months ago. 14 months ago, the same month we started trying for a baby. I thought about that for a long time. The timing of it. While I was standing in our bathroom with a pregnancy test, while I was sitting in the closet after negative result after negative result, he was signing a lease somewhere in Cedar Park. He was building a parallel life with the same hands that rubbed my back in small circles. On the 3rd day, I drove to Cedar Park. I want to say I knew exactly what I was doing. I want to say I had a clear plan. But the truth is that by the time I turned onto her street, I still had no idea what I intended to say. I only knew that I needed to see it. I needed to put my body in the geography of the truth, because the photographs and the documents and the forged signatures were still somehow abstract to me, still happening at a slight remove, and I needed to close that distance. The house was a pale yellow rental with a narrow driveway and a small garden bed in front, maintained neatly. There was a welcome mat that said, "So glad you're here," in sunflower yellow letters. A potted rosemary bush by the front door. A pair of muddy running shoes set neatly to the side. I sat in my car for a while, then I got out. I rang the bell. When the door opened, Amanda Reeves was wearing a light blue cardigan over a white t-shirt, her hair pushed back with a headband. She was holding a mug. She looked at me with the politely expectant expression of a person who has no idea what is about to happen to them. "Hi," I said. "My name is Sarah. I think we need to talk." Something passed over her face. Not recognition, she had no reason to recognize me, but a kind of alertness, the way people look when an unexpected note arrives and they aren't sure yet if it is good news or bad. "Okay," she said slowly. "About what?" I pulled up the document on my phone. The refinancing application. Her name next to my address. Her face, reading it, went very still. "Come in," she said quietly. Her living room was warm and a little cluttered in the comfortable way of a person who actually lives in their home rather than staging it for visitors. There were stacks of student papers on the coffee table, half-graded. A half-finished mug of tea that matched the one in her hand. A bookshelf crowded with children's literature and a few novels with broken spines. And on the side table by the couch, a framed photograph. My husband, this time in a blue jacket I did not recognize, standing next to Amanda at what looked like a wedding reception. They were dressed up. She was wearing a deep red dress. He was looking at her and not at the camera, and his expression was one I had not seen on his face in years. "How long?" I asked. I sat on the edge of the couch because my legs had decided they were done supporting me without assistance. Amanda sat in the armchair across from me. She was holding her mug with both hands, tightly, the way you hold something when you need an anchor. "Almost 2 years," she said. Her voice was careful and measured, but underneath it I could hear the beginning of something fracturing. "Did you know he was married?" The pause before her answer was the only answer I needed. "He told me he was separated," she said. "He told me the divorce was almost finalized. He showed me." She stopped. She put her mug down and pressed her fingers against her mouth briefly. "He showed me a document, something that looked like a separation agreement." Her eyes had started to fill. I want you to know that I would never knowingly." "I know," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. The woman sitting across from me had not stolen anything. Something had been stolen from both of us by the same person. There is a specific quality to the silence that falls in a room when two people are recognizing, simultaneously, the shape of a deception they have both been inside. It is not comfortable, it is not warm, but it is honest. In a way that almost nothing else had been for me in 2 years, and somewhere inside the shock and the grief, I felt my body respond to that honesty with something almost like relief. "The document was fake," I said. "We have never filed for separation. We are legally married. I didn't know you existed until 3 days ago." Amanda looked at the photograph on the side table for a moment. Then she looked away from it. "I found a credit card bill last month," she said quietly. "An address I didn't recognize. When I asked him about it, he said it was a rental he used when he had to stay late in the city." She paused. He was very convincing. "I know," I said again. "He's very good at that." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The refinancing application, I didn't know he had filed that. He asked me to sign some documents a few months ago. He said it was for insurance purposes. I didn't read them carefully enough." She put her face in her hands briefly. "God, I signed papers and I didn't even read them." I understood that feeling. I had been signing papers for 5 years, metaphorically speaking, and not reading them either. We sat together for another hour. Not easy, not comfortable, but honest. We compared dates and details the way two investigators might go over the evidence in a case, and with each piece we placed beside the other, the architecture of what my husband had built became clearer and more nauseating. 2 phone numbers, one for each of us. 2 explanations for every extended absence business travel. To me. Late nights at the office. To her. He had used us to make each other's absences sensible. When he was with Amanda, I thought he was in San Antonio for a company conference. When he was with me, Amanda thought he was on a deadline. Unreachable. The loan with my forged signature had funded the lease on her house. The money draining from our savings had gone into a joint account he had opened with Amanda. "He told me that account was his personal savings," Amanda said. She was very pale now. "He said he was saving it for us. For the future. The money I had been putting aside for a baby, for a bigger house, for a life I thought I was building. It had been paying for a different life entirely." I drove home in a state that I can only describe as a kind of enforced calm. The crying was still waiting for me somewhere down the road. I knew that, but first there were things to do. I was an accountant's daughter. My mother had spent 30 years as a bookkeeper, and she had taught me early that the most dangerous response to a financial crisis is to feel your way through it. You document, you quantify, you build a record. I called a family law attorney that evening. Her name was Diane, and she had the brisk, unsurprised manner of a woman who had heard every variety of this particular story at least a dozen times. When I finished laying out the facts, she was quiet for 2 seconds, and then she said, "Okay, first thing we do is freeze the joint accounts before anything else moves. Second thing, do you have copies of all the documents you've described?" I did. I had photographed everything. "Good," she said. "The forged signature on the loan is a felony. We'll file a police report as part of the divorce proceedings. The improper refinancing attempt is a separate matter. What you're describing is not just an unfaithful husband. This is financial fraud." I sat in the car in our driveway, looking at the oak tree, and thought about that. When my husband came home that night, he set his keys on the hook by the door and asked how my day was. "Quiet," I said. He made us both dinner. We watched television. He fell asleep before me, the way he always did, and I lay beside him in the dark and looked at the ceiling and understood that I was lying beside a stranger. Not a stranger who had arrived recently. A stranger who had always been there, looking back at me through a face I had learned to love. I served him the divorce papers 4 days later. I had thought about doing it dramatically. I had imagined confrontations. But when the moment came, I simply placed the envelope on the kitchen table in front of him while he was drinking his morning coffee, and I said, "I know about the loan. I know about Amanda. I know about the account in Cedar Park. I have copies of everything. And so does my attorney." The color left his face in a way I had never seen before. It did not drain gradually. It simply went, all at once, like a light switching off. "Sarah," he started. "Don't," I said, not loudly. I didn't need volume. "There is nothing you can say that is going to change any document that I have already filed. The only question now is whether you make this simple or whether you make it complicated." He opened his mouth. He closed it. "The financial fraud is a felony," I said. "My attorney has already been in contact with the bank regarding the forged signature. What happens next depends entirely on how you conduct yourself in the next few weeks." He was silent for a long time. Then, in a voice so quiet I barely heard it, he said, "I never meant for it to go this far." "I know," I said. "People who are deliberately cruel rarely do. They just keep making small choices until the small choices add up to something catastrophic." I left the room. I heard him sit at the table for a very long time. The weeks that followed were not clean. They were not simple. Divorce never is. There were attorneys and depositions, and the particular indignity of sitting across a conference table from a man you shared a bed with for 5 years while both of you speak through intermediaries about who owns the pots and pans. There were the friends who didn't know what to say and said nothing. There were the ones who took sides, and not always the side I expected. There was also Amanda. She had called me the day after my confrontation, her voice tight and careful. She told me she had ended things. She told me she had already spoken to an attorney of her own about the fraudulent account and the documents she had unwittingly signed. She said she was sorry. Not in the vague, reflexive way people say it to fill silence, but with the weighted, specific quality of a person who had been sitting with their guilt long enough to really feel the shape of it. I didn't forgive her right away. I want to be honest about that too. There were days when what I felt toward her was not warm. There were nights when I lay awake and ran through every moment, every explanation she could have asked for and didn't, every flag she could have questioned, and I felt something cold and righteous in my chest. But there was also the morning I called her because I had found one of his sweatshirts in the back of the closet and I needed to say his name out loud to someone who understood the particular weight of it, and she answered on the second ring and listened without interruption for 18 minutes while I talked. And somewhere in those 18 minutes, the cold thing in my chest softened just slightly around the edges. We are not best friends. I want to be clear about that. What we are is harder to name two people bound by a shared experience that most people will never fully understand, trying to be decent to each other in the aftermath of a man who was not decent to either of us. Some weeks we don't speak at all. Some weeks we text each other memes about divorce attorneys and laugh in the bleak, specific way that only people who have been through something truly absurd can laugh. She drives to Austin on Saturdays sometimes. We go to the farmer's market on Republic Square. She brings homemade granola because she is that kind of person. I bring the coffee. The divorce was finalized 7 months after I sat across that title company table. My husband accepted a plea agreement on the fraud charges reduced sentence in exchange for restitution, which means I will be recovering portions of the stolen money over the next several years, slowly, in increments, like a debt being paid down. The house was sold. I was surprised by how little I grieved it. I had thought the oak tree would be the hardest thing to leave behind, but on the day the keys transferred, I stood under it for the last time and found that what I felt was mostly tired, and underneath the tired, something small and tentative that I was not yet ready to call hope. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment near the rehab center, close enough to walk on the mornings when the weather allows. It is smaller than I am used to. The kitchen window looks out at a parking lot. There is one closet and not enough cabinet space, and I like it more than I have liked any place I have lived in years, because every single thing in it is mine. I think about the version of myself that sat on that porch every morning, looking at the oak tree, feeling something close to gratitude. I am not angry at her. She was doing the best she could with the information she had. But I want to say to her what I say to my patients when they are 9 weeks into a recovery that feels endless. The fact that you cannot see the progress yet does not mean it isn't happening. Healing doesn't announce itself. It is quiet and incremental, and frequently indistinguishable from simply surviving, right up until the moment it isn't. There is a man I have been getting to know. His name is James, and he is a friend of a friend, a high school history teacher who coaches girls' soccer on the side and has a laugh that is slightly too loud for restaurants. I met him at a birthday dinner 3 months ago. He called me 2 weeks later, and when I told him, over coffee, that I had been through a complicated divorce and was not in a hurry and needed things to move slowly, he said, without any visible discomfort, "That sounds completely reasonable. What are you doing next Saturday?" I am not telling you this because the story ends with a man. It does not end with a man. I am telling you this because I want you to understand what it feels like to sit across from someone and realize, slowly, that you are not afraid of them, that you are not monitoring the exits in your own mind, that the guard you learned to keep posted at the door of yourself has set down his post, just briefly, just this once, and the world has not ended because of it. I spent last Saturday afternoon at a soccer field watching 12-year-old girls fight over a ball with the kind of absolute commitment that only children and very certain people can manage. James paced the sideline and yelled encouragement in a voice that carried across the whole field. Afterward, his team won, and one of the girls, small, fierce, with her jersey perpetually coming untucked, ran over and launched herself at him in a hug that nearly knocked him sideways. He laughed that slightly too loud laugh and hugged her back. I sat on the bleachers and watched, and I felt the thing I had been careful not to name for months rise up quietly and name itself anyway. I am not the same woman who sat in that waiting room sipping bad coffee and trusting the shape of a life she had not examined closely enough. I am not going to tell you I am grateful for what happened, because I don't think women are obligated to mind suffering for gratitude on anyone's behalf. What I will tell you is that I know myself now in a way I did not before. I know where my edges are. I know what I will accept and what I will not. I know that I am capable of sitting in an office across from a woman I had every reason to resent and choosing, deliberately, to see her as a person instead of a symbol of everything I had lost. That choice did not come easily. None of this did. But I made it. And I keep making it. And somewhere in the making of it, almost without my noticing, the woman I used to be the one who went quiet in the bathroom so no one would hear put herself back together, not the way she was before. Better than that. With the seams showing, the way repaired things always do, and stronger because of them. If you are sitting right now in the dark of your own tunnel, if the story you thought was yours has turned out to belong to someone else entirely, I want you to hear this. The moment you find out the truth is not the moment your life ends. It is the moment your actual life begins. The one built on ground that will hold you. Because this time, you tested it first. You are going to be okay. And not just okay. You are going to be the version of yourself that survived, and there is no stronger thing in the world than that.